Do you ever look at something you made when you were younger and just cringe? I've got a lot of those things. I was always an imaginative kid, and ever since I was 3 years old, I always had to have some sort of new creative endeavor. It started out cute. My mom would bring back paper from her job, and I'd draw little stories on them and make a book. My first ever story was actually about a whole pizza disappearing by the slice. But when you're a kid, you don't always have a quality filter for your work. You don't scrutinize everything, you just create. And sometimes it leads to some really cringe-worthy things. Like this collage I made of my RuneScape character when I was 10. Or the fake tribal language I created when I was 11, as seen in this awful example photo I made of supposed tiki sightings. But there isn't a more cringeworthy creation from my adolescence than what I'm about to show you. I made a video game when I was 15, and it's terrible. Let me tell you why. So, you might be wondering how I made this game in the first place. Well, back in the summer of 2011, I discovered a program called RPG Maker VX, which is the thing you're seeing right now. This program is designed to give you the tools for streamlining the creation of a video game by giving you access to a large array of features, such as mapping tools and a built-in battle system. Since I had always been interested in video game development and I had nothing better to do during my summer vacation, I decided that I was going to make a game. But this game wasn't ever supposed to be made for public release. It was to be released to my friends and family, so there are a lot of inside jokes and references in the game that I'm going to have to censor for privacy reasons. But just because it wasn't made for the public didn't mean that I didn't try. In fact, I tried really hard. It took me the whole summer to create this abomination. And from that effort, what you're about to witness is an amalgamation of awful game design and dreadfully bad writing. But before I get into it, I'm going to emphasize that since I consider myself a writing channel, I'll be focusing on the writing elements of the game more so than the mechanical elements. But there are plenty of game design sins I'll mention throughout this video, such as stolen sprites and stolen music. And those aren't the only things I stole. I stole paragraphs, not to mention entire plot points. So, without further ado, let's take a look at my worst creative endeavor, Purified Play. The game begins in a palace. You play as Donovan, a soldier who becomes disgraced and banished from the kingdom of who knows where for refusing to kill a man whose retirement benefits the king apparently doesn't want to pay anymore. 5 years later, Donovan wants to venture the world again. I don't know why it takes him that long, but conveniently, there's a forest nearby that he explores where all the trees are uniform, and he can take a stroll straight through to the end, where a gargoyle awaits him. The gargoyle is a bit of a dick to say the least. And it's here where I have to mention that I actually debugged the game to give myself the max levels because the game is so stupidly difficult that I was going to have to grind on random monsters for hours just to have a chance at beating the game. So, forgive me for the easy boss battles, which, funnily enough, doesn't include this one since I made the boss so overpowered that it can kill anything. After some terrible and abusive language that I have to censor, Donovan wants revenge and figures out that he has to slay this gargoyle because the last guy who tried failed, even though his gravestone says otherwise for some reason. In Donovan's travels searching for the gargoyle, he ends up in Pallet Town. And yes, I mean that Pallet Town. Anyway, you make it to the town pub, where a mysterious knight claims to be taking over the town for some group called the DSR organization. I have no idea what DSR stands for, but maybe I thought it sounded cool when I was younger, so let's just keep calling them that from this point forward. Donovan teams up with one of the locals to fight the knight, who turns out to be Mordekaiser from League of Legends. And since I'm overpowered, I kill him in just one hit just for him to not actually be dead for some reason. Here, Christian joins Donovan's party and he's probably the worst character in the game, which you'll see later, and it's solely because of all of his awful dialogue. Now here's where the writing gets even more convoluted. There's a man in the corner of the bar whose sole purpose in the game is to give exposition, and as a writer, you must know to avoid this and instead make sure that the story develops organically without a character just telling you what's happening. The man, who has no background and never shows up in the story again, tells Donovan that he must find and free 4 goddesses to obtain enough power to destroy the DSR. Why does he know this? Who knows? Anyway, he tells you everything you need to know about the story. The DSR is a bad, secretive, controlling government that is looking for things called star pieces, and these star pieces are going to be used to summon something called an Iblis. He says some other random nonsense about the Iblis, and the reason why I say that it's nonsense is because it has no meaning in this game. Why? Because the star pieces in the Iblis aren't even from this game in the first place. It's from another game that I completely plagiarized, and that game is a flash game called Starwish. Starwish is a great flash game that I do recommend playing, though it is quite dated by now. In this game, there's a similar plot development. A character is seeking star pieces to gain power. These star pieces open up a world that lets the Iblis into our world through something called the Book of Gates. The Iblis is a character that feeds off of desires, and so on and so forth. Anyway, in Purified play, claim that once the Iblis is summoned, it will be used to allow the DSR to go to a place of paradise, and that this will make everyone depressed because like, the Iblis is bad and stuff. Okay, sure, I can buy that. But then I claim that this Mordekaiser guy has super extreme powers that are hidden by some orb, but because plot reasons, he didn't bring it to this bar. Of course he didn't. That would be too inconvenient for the protagonists. Anyway, let's get back to the story. Donovan and Christian head to the Earth Goddess's hideout to obtain the first of the 4 powers they need. This dungeon begins with some obnoxious button mashing, so don't expect good dungeon design at all. Every single dungeon in this game is basically the same layout. Enter a large room, meander through the maze, and make it to the next level. I'm not exaggerating either. All you do is walk around, and I even disabled the random monster spawns just so I didn't rage at how tedious it is. This is what the game looked like before I disabled the monster spawns. After completing a not so clever strength puzzle stolen from Pokemon, Donovan battles Elvark the Dragon from RuneScape, and Christian claims to be king of the alpha males once they're victorious. The goddess doesn't even bother with exposition and gives Donovan some of her power, and our heroes set off for their next location on the world map. They make it to the next town, and Mordekaiser appears in another pub to take over the city. But this time, he's strong because he's brought his plot device orb. He defeats some legendary party who tries to stop him, and they have to teleport out in an attempt to survive. Afterwards, Mordekaiser spares your life for no reason even though you whooped him earlier. And once again, a town falls victim to the DSR. But even though the town is taken over by the DSR, you can walk around the town freely despite the fact that they're supposed to be menacing and controlling. Once you explore enough, Donovan is able to recruit a new member to the party. A girl named Jenna, who basically says, "YOLO, let's go explore," before she suddenly brings up that her parents went missing and she wants to find them. You've got the option to sniff her bed afterwards. And no, I'm not showing what happens when you do, but she basically forgives you for doing so. Once you leave town, you find a city with a guy named Cole, which was one of the guys who was fighting Mordekaiser earlier. He distrusts you, so you must find the fire goddess's power to earn his trust. Christian makes another terrible joke, and here comes another terrible dungeon. This time, there are a bunch of gates that block you until you pass some timed input typing test. But it actually isn't that bad, because it's sort of fun if you ignore the fact that you have to do it like 50 different times. The obnoxious button mashing returns in this dungeon, and so do the large maze-like rooms that you must meander through. What a fun and engaging experience, right? Anyway, you get through, fight the boss, get your second power up, and you return to Cole, who reveals that Mordekaiser actually tracked him and his party down after they teleported. But Cole was teleported away when his party wizard used the last of her mana to save him. Cole is an annoying pessimist, but Donovan and his party manage to recruit him anyway, and they set forth for some more power. They then arrive at the third goddess's location, where another member of the DSR is searching for a star piece. Donovan's party lets the DSR into the dungeon like idiots before they take care of some guy named Cameron, a character whose only interesting feature is how cool he looks. If you've been paying attention, you already know what to expect from this dungeon. Garbage. There's a stupid ice sliding puzzle, a stupid maze, and another stupid maze that leads to a stupid boss battle that gives you some more power from a stupid goddess who did nothing to stop the DSR from getting the star piece in the dungeon. Which, if Donovan and his party were actually smart, they would have went for the star piece instead of the goddess's power if the star pieces are actually supposed to be that strong. Also, Christian spazzes out for no reason once he gets the power. On your way to the next city, you come across a small home with an old man who went crazy because of the DSR. Funny enough, despite how dumb the dialogue is, this place is one of the only places in the game where some semi-natural world building is done. And you actually get to see the effects of the DSR's actions without people just telling you that they're bad people. After making it to the city of Barak, Jenna tells the party that the king probably knows what happened to her missing parents. But since Donovan is an insensitive bitch, he puts off the visit to the king in favor of exploring the town first. I actually agree with him though, so let's take a plot break. There's a lot to see in this city because it's jam-packed full of references, more so than Ready Player One was. And not only that, there are so many oddities here that it'd be stupid of me not to show them. I won't show everything for the sake of time, but let's take a look at some of these ridiculous things. You find out that Christian is a pedophile. You meet a kid who gets the date wrong. You meet a guy who sells you cell tech. You find a bar where Jamie Lynn Spears is apparently the owner, but she's some fat guy. You find me, the creator of the game, as an NPC chicken with a picture of Bert from Sesame Street. And you can fight Cnanners the YouTuber, and you could also fight Cthulhu too. There's plenty more where that came from, but let's get back to the story. Donovan and friends go see the king, who is so unbelievably rude that he even explains that he had jailed Jenna's missing parents just because they wanted to rebel against the DSR, stating that their rebellion was going to cause more damage than the DSR would. The man sounds like a real politician though, blaming those who rise against a tyrannical government as opposed to the tyranny itself. But that's beside the point. Anyway, the king outright refuses to help Donovan's crew because he doesn't believe that the DSR is a threat. Donovan tries to reason with the king, but the king fights back and even calls upon the rude gargoyle from the beginning of the game to help him. For some dumb reason, they're homies. Once the gargoyle is defeated, the king suddenly changes his mind about everything and offers to help Donovan and his friends, offering them his soldiers, access to his prison, and access to some secret weaponry. Right when things are all good though, Mordekaiser shows up and straight up murders the fucker. But again, because he's dumb, he spares you and disappears. You would think that the king's death would shake up the whole kingdom and be a huge plot point. But everyone acts like nothing even happened, and somehow everyone is aware of what his orders were, despite the fact that he didn't even get to tell his soldiers what to do. Since the king's death doesn't matter at all, we get to go explore the prison to find Jenna's missing parents, where we find Jenna's dad standing beside his rotting skeleton of a wife. Before you're able to get him out of jail, Mordekaiser shows up and straight up murders Jenna's dad just like he killed the king, for no reason except to be comically evil. Afterwards, Jenna holds a funeral for her dad, but not her mom, because who cares about her mom anyway, right? Once that not so emotional scene is over, Donovan and his crew head back into the city to get one of the secret weapons that the king promised them. There are 4 choices here: a sword for Donovan, a necklace for Christian, a cape for Jenna, and apparently, a shovel for Cole that you can't even take. I chose the Cape of Anus. Who wouldn't? Before Donovan and his crew can take on the DSR, there's still one more goddess left to bother. The Wind Goddess. This is probably the most obnoxious dungeon thus far, because it starts with some puzzle with some inexplicable rules that I only ended up solving through trial and error. The obnoxiousness doesn't stop there though. Up next, you've got to ride a minecart and avoid a bunch of barrels. And it's actually harder than it looks, because the high-speed movement of the rails feels awful on your eyes, and sometimes it's impossible to avoid the barrels because of the clunky controls. I stupidly die a few times. But it actually wasn't that bad. And also, if you thought we wouldn't see another maze, you thought wrong. Anyway, like with the other dungeons, you beat the boss and go to the goddess to claim your power. But this time, she also tells Donovan that the DSR hired a bunch of bounty hunters, so it's up to you to recruit some of your own to level the playing field. Sounds cool, right? Well, just when you think you're about to go on some long quest to find a bunch of bounty hunters, all you end up doing is walking into some beat up ruins where some guy joins you just because he wanted to eliminate his competition. He's the only bounty hunter you recruit. Since nothing cool happens with the bounty hunters, you head straight over to the DSR castle, where you meet up with a bunch of NPCs you interacted with throughout the course of the game, plus all of King Ronald's guards that somehow knew about his orders. This would actually be pretty cool if it wasn't for the fact that the characters on your side are people you've only talked to like once. And with that begins the final climax of the game, taking on the DSR. You enter the castle to be greeted with nonsense and a whole lot of enemies. So everyone gives their little speeches before the great big battle begins, and you've got to fight the first boss of the DSR, who I'm censoring for privacy reasons. When you defeat him, you have to answer a few trivia questions to continue. But the trivia questions are terrible, and the first question is already incorrect. 117 is a multiple of 13, but apparently, public school math didn't save me, and the NPC even had the nerve to call me an idiot for getting the question right. Once you get through, you must pass 3 tests: the test of analyzation, the test of endurance, and the test of speed and accuracy. We'll start with the test of analyzation, since those trivia questions proved that we're geniuses. True to this game's quality though, the test of analyzation is nonsensical. There's supposed to be a guide to help you understand what to do, but I don't know what any of this means anymore. So if anyone in the comments can actually solve this, I'll salute you. But for now, I ignore the challenge and just cheat my way to the end. Next up is the test of endurance, which is probably the worst one because you have to button mash every single boulder to get to the end. After giving your finger a workout, the only thing left is the test of speed and accuracy, which I actually get through quite easily. The second boss of the DSR is next, and again, I have to censor who this is for privacy reasons. Once you beat him, you can explore more of the castle, and you end up finding Cole's old party members who are locked in a jail. They're hesitant to help you at first because they're just as pessimistic as Cole is, but they relent and they head off to go destroy Mordekaiser's plot device orbs. Shortly after, you actually run into Mordekaiser, who has fortunately already lost one of his plot device orbs. Once he's finally dead, the tediousness doesn't end, as you must go through some more input timing tests to progress to the final puzzle of the game. The final puzzle is actually a jumbled sliding puzzle of someone's face, so again, I have to censor it for privacy reasons. And now, it's time for what we've all been waiting for, the final boss battles. The final DSR boss summons the Iblis, and in your attempt to stop it, he summons some enemies and slain foes to hold you off. But luckily, you have some help from some of the NPCs and the goddesses who finally decided to be useful. After beating the final DSR boss, everyone but you and the legendary party got destroyed in the battle, so it's up to Donovan and his crew to follow the Iblis into the portal to kill it once and for all. Since the legendary party is stupid, they decide to sacrifice themselves by fighting the Iblis alone to weaken it, and they don't even entertain the notion of fighting it together. Donovan shows how insensitive he is again by calling Cole selfish for wanting to help his former party. And Donovan is actually okay with these people sacrificing themselves for some reason. When your main protagonist is a dick, I don't think that bodes well for your audience liking the story if he has no redeeming features. Anyway, once those idiots are dead, it's time for the final boss battle. The Iblis doesn't do anything special in this boss battle except for having a second form and just being stronger than everything else in the game. So it's an easy boss battle for me with my maxed out stats. After the Iblis is defeated, there's an unnecessarily long 20-minute ending cutscene to the game that basically shows what everyone decides to do now that there's apparently peace in the world. The goddesses return to their hideouts, Isaac from Golden Sun heads out to return to his original game, some NPC who never talked the entire game returns to her vow of silence, the bounty hunter leaves for his ruins, and so on and so forth. Christian goes to get a drink while Cole becomes depressed because his friends are dead. And by the way, that's the last you see of him in this ending cutscene. Donovan and Jenna decide that they want to continue adventuring, so they head out together. There's supposed to be some sort of emotional payoff at the end, but it isn't earned because you just don't care enough about the characters in the world. And although I tried to be all philosophical at the end with a bunch of these cringeworthy lessons plastered into the credits, there's no reason to care about anything I say. Like, at all. As a writer, I shouldn't have to be spelling out the game's lessons and morals. These lessons and morals should be self-evident, and if they aren't, then I didn't do a good job in writing them into the story. And that's where I think this game's greatest fault is. It acts as if it's some sort of powerful and emotional tale, but at its core, it's just a jumble of mishandled cliches, stolen set pieces, and awful, abusive jokes. I think it's easy for young writers to try to mimic everything they like, and in doing so, they can create messes such as this one. But creative mistakes are necessary for learning, which is why I don't actually look down on the game too much. Like a writer should, I continually reflect on all of the creative decisions I make, and it helps me learn a lot about what I should and shouldn't do in my writing. The way I tore down this game is the same way I tear down everything else I do, and because of that scrutiny, I hope that with each new project I create, my skills just get better and better. With that being said, this channel is new and is one of my newest creative endeavors I've decided to work on. If you enjoyed this video, it would really help me to leave a like and a comment. And if you like this kind of content, please give me a sub as well. I promise I won't flood your sub box. If you're interested in my writing, I've also left a link to my first book in the description, along with some of my other social links. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you guys soon.